Hi, welcome to the fourth in the back channel rant series. You can probably tell from the graphic there that I am not a big fan of ESP-01s. For the reasons I'm not, watch the video, but if you think already that they are smaller and cheaper than some of the alternatives, then you're wrong, partly, and you need to watch the video and see why. But first, please subscribe to the channel. Click on the like button, click the bell icon to get notified, and support me on Patreon if you can. There's a link in the description below. So we're going to do this a bit backwards from the normal videos. Just this introductory slide to set the ground rules. Then we're going to jump straight into the live lab and actually look at some of these things. And then we're going to come back to this presentation to put some actual figures on it, formalise the findings we found in the lab, and come to a summary and a conclusion. Okay, so first rule is, a lot of lazy people, including me a lot of the time, I'll be honest, say ESP-01 when really they mean ESP-01S. There's a difference. Okay, without the S, it means it's got 512k of RAM in it, which makes it absolutely useless. You can't OTA anything of any size from the Arduino ID, and it really is a piece of junk with no use in the modern world whatsoever. Throw it in the bin. The S means it has 1 megabyte, and that's just about usable, and we'll see why when we get into the lab. I normally use WeMustD1 Mini. That's what I'm going to compare everything with, and any prices that I quote are taken from ebay.fr, amazon.fr, as of 28th of the 5th. So let's get into the lab. Okay, here we are in the lab, and there's some ESP-01 stuff here, and there are two myths that I want to dispel. And so, first of all, we will talk about what I usually use as a development board, which is a WeMustD1 Mini like this, and it comes with the pins to put it into a breadboard if you want, but you don't have to solder them in. So if you don't want to, you can it'd be much like this little shield, but with a couple of components stuck on either side. So it wouldn't be very thick at all. It'd be kind of the thickness of that can on the top, plus however thick that is. And all you need to program it is a micro USB cable that everybody's got at least one of. So I'm going to put that to one side now, so that all we have on the bench is ESP-01 stuff. Now let's be careful here, because that is an ESP-01. My lighting's not the best here, but if I offer that up to the light, you can see that that's blue. I hope you can. Okay, it's blue. That's one of the original ones. It's got 512k of flash memory in it, and it is a piece of junk, and that's the most useful thing you can do with it. There's nothing useful that you can do with one of those with modern software. So let's take a look instead at this one, which is black usually, and this is an ESP-01S, and because it's an 01S, it's got 1 megabyte of flash. Now 1 megabyte of flash is useful. It's usable. In fact, one of my favourite home IoT devices, the Sonoff, is an ESP-8266 with 1 megabyte of flash in them, and I got them all over the house and the barns, so I love them. So there's not a problem with 1 megabyte of flash, because H4 plugins can run easily in less than that and include SPIFs to hold the web server. 1 megabyte's fine. The problem you've got is that this is not breadboard friendly. It's got this little double row of 4-pin connectors, and you can't put that into a breadboard without shorting them all out. This is not designed for breadboard development and never was. So bearing in mind breadboard development is mostly what beginners do, you need some kind of adapter for it. Now then, you can get one of these, and all it has on it, if you look carefully, is a little voltage regulator here. And that drops 5 volts to 3.3 because the ESP chip itself will only take 3.3. If you try and put 5 in it, you'll fry it. So that drops it to 5 volts. From 5 volts to 3.3. And you stick your little ESP in there. And then you do something with those 4 pins. What do you do with them? You've got to connect them to something like this, which is an FTDI adapter. It's a USB to serial adapter. And at one end, as you can see, you've got the wires coming out, the USB connector. And at the other end, look, you've got these wires which would go onto there, and you'd then be able to program it. Except you wouldn't, because as any fool know, to program an ESP-8266, you've got to hold GPIO low at the point when you start the programming cycle. So this adapter is absolutely also a heap of junk and completely useless. So don't buy one. Don't waste your €1 or whatever they cost. You might instead be tempted to want to go for something like this, which is a much neater, much more compact adapter. You stick your adapter in there, and that goes straight into your USB port. It's still a little bit of a Frankenstein's monster though, but it is a very convenient way of connecting it to your PC so that you can see what's coming up and down the serial. But you can't program it. So even though they can be quite useful, yeah, I'm not going to throw it in the bin, that one. I might, yeah, one day in the future, when I wake up sweating from a bad dream, I might use that again. But otherwise, it's only a small noise for that one. We're starting to love this thing already, are we? Oh. Right, so what you need is something like this. Or some kind of lash up with a button soldered from GPIO to ground that you switch on and press. And nightmare scenario. Something like this is what you need. See that little switch on the slide switch? I'm not going to bring it too close up to the camera because it probably won't focus on it, but it's got 2 positions. One of them is UART and the other one is boot. So at last, we've got an easy way of holding boot low when we program it. So we stick that in there. We stick that in the boot position, like that. And then we put that whole assembly into our machine, and we then upload with Arduino IDE. Because this has got an FTDI adapter built into it, so that's quite handy. And it's also even handier because a proper good FTDI adapter that you can use for anything like STM32s and any kind of ESP32 as well, they're between like $4, $5, sometimes $6 or $7 for a proper one. These little cheapies are about $2 and they do just the job. So get one of these if you can. Actually don't, because you don't want to be getting an ESP-01. They're a nightmare. Now, if all you want to do is flash the 1 GPIO it's got, you're fine. But otherwise, you might need, if you get it on a breadboard, then you're going to need a little breadboard adapter like that, which takes, be careful, you've got to put it around the other way. Oh, it's a nightmare. I hate them. Right? Again, you get a Frankenstein's monster, but you get 2 rows of pins that you can put into a breadboard. So the very minimum you need to get this ESP-01S programmed and onto a breadboard is those 3 pieces of kit. Okay? So that comes into the equation when we're looking at the myth that these are cheaper than these. We'll look at that in a minute when we go back out of the lab. But for the moment, let's talk about the size. Now, kind of obvious, isn't it, that the size of that is bigger than the size of that? But let's think about this a little. I don't have to put those headers in. I can just solder wires directly to that and then kind of glue that or stick it to some kind of dev board. So the absolute maximum height of that thing that I need is kind of it's about, by the time I stop mucking about, it's about 7 mil. Okay, and then it's what, 25 and a bit wide and whatever, 34 long. And then this one, here's the thing, these things come with that nasty double row header soldered in. You can't, well, you can remove it if you're daft enough, but as delivered, the height of that, the minimum height of that, has to include the headers, which isn't that much. But as we've seen, normally the only way to get it into a breadboard, so all of this is for developers who want breadboard ready devices, you've got to put it into one of those sockets, which means that it's height now. So when we think about the volume of space that this takes up on your dev board versus the volume of space that this takes up on your dev board, measure, measure, measure. I'll show you the figures in a minute when we get back out of the lab. You'll find that there really isn't that much in it. So I think that's probably dealt with all the issues I need to deal with. We'll go into detail of those as we get back into PowerPoint land. So let's do some myth busting. I hope Adam and Jamie don't put a copyright strike in against me. That's a mark of homage to them. They are some of my heroes. But this is eBay France, about an hour ago. As you can see on the left, for a pack of 5 ESP-01s, middling price around about $10. Pack of 5 Wemos D1 minis, including the headers, with postage around about 10 and a bit bucks. So what I say here when I say worryingly cheap outliers is this, is that this cheap ones are not that much cheaper, are they? It's $7 plus 8, 27, 8, 9, 7, 8. It's just under €8 for those 5, but some unscrupulous dealers, knowing that people used to use the blue versus black to distinguish the 01, which is useless, from the 01S, which is usable, started making cheap 01s with 512 flash on black boards. So, look, this isn't science, this is a rant. Forget that outlier. Forget the odd cents here or there. A nice round figure is, and here's the proof that this is absolutely and utterly busted, is that they're about $2 each, both of them. All right, so that's the price we're going to go forward with. So that myth is totally busted already. Now let's look at the fact that, don't forget, we've got to buy some of these things. That's $2 for one of them, $1.50 for one of them if you buy it by mistake, like I did. Forget those, they are such junk. And here's your little adapters, which are about €1. So when you think of what I'm calling cost to breadboard, you've got $2, which is the same for both. All right, so we can kind of rule it out of the equation, cancels out. You've got at least another €2 and at least another maybe $1.50 to actually get prototyping on a breadboard with an ESP-01. So here's some actual figures Little brief summary then. Here's my cost to breadboard, so it's at least $6 extra for ESP-01 before you can start playing when you start with a basic back of 5. And you always do, because you're going to blow one or two of them up. You will, trust me. So D1 Mini, $2 each, and an old USB cable, and you're off and away. Just to think, when I say unfettered GPIO, what I mean here is GPIOs that aren't interfered with or shared with any other function. And on the ESP-01, the only real GPIO you've got is shared with the output LED, and also, it can't run on 5 volts either. So it's got absolutely nothing whatsoever going for it, and it actually costs more money. So anybody that tells you they're cheaper is talking rubbish. Okay, let's move on. They are smaller, apparently. Well, yeah, actually, I can't argue with the figures. I've got to be honest. Obviously, I'm trying to prove a point is that they're crap, but I can't argue with the science. The truth is that the volume on any implementation that's of any use that doesn't require, massive amount of engineering is less than 20% bigger for a D1. Okay, so let's look at a summary. Here's your feature summary. Memory, D1's the obvious winner. GPIO by a mile. That there is enough to win the competition straight away and have the ESP-01 disqualified for a lot of people if you can't breadboard it. However, D1 wins it. The fact you can program it without any extra gear, D1 wins it. The fact you can use a common 5 volt power supply for it, D1 wins. It's got direct USB, D1 wins. It's cheaper to breadboard, D1 wins. The only thing that the ESP-01 wins on is that it's got a slightly smaller footprint by volume. So you've got to ask yourself this. Anybody who's an ESP-01 supporter and even thinks that they're worth bothering about anymore, and they're not, which is why nobody makes them anymore, which is what we call obsolete in the English language. Anybody that believes that, show them this and ask them to justify to you whether the loss of all those extra features is worth that 19% extra space. And don't ask them to work out the hassle factor. Look, I think you can see that nobody in their right mind should be using ESP-01 anymore for IoT projects. They're an absolute nightmare. That's a long enough rant. I'm going to leave you with those thoughts and figures. Just show that to anybody who wants to argue.